World of Tanks has been around for 14 years, and self-propelled guns, or as some may call it, artillery, have been a problem for 14 years. Can you believe it? Well, I found the solution. Seriously, I thought of a way to fix artillery. I no longer wish to have it outright removed. But first, we're going to start by explaining what artillery is, and we'll start from the beginning when World of Tanks was first made.
200 Schaden, 200 Schaden, 200 Schaden.
The whole idea is that artillery is an indirect fire class meant to provide long-range support. They have exceptional range, able to see past the maximum render distance in World of Tanks of 565 meters, and hit targets on the other side of the map, combined with their huge calibers and massive high explosive shells. In theory, they're supposed to dig out heavily armored tanks who are in very strong positions. Well, that's the theory. Anyway, it doesn't quite work like that. What actually ends up happening is artillery damages anybody who tries to progress the game. Unless you are hiding at the back of the map or cowering behind some buildings the entire match, unspotted, artillery is just going to constantly be chipping away at your health. And the worst part about artillery is that it very rarely actually does what it's designed to do, which is dig out heavily armored targets in strong positions. In the beginning, artillery had guns you would expect from their class. They used to have massive high damage guns. Take the Object 261 for example. It has a 180mm gun. This is similar to the FV 4005's gun, which is 183mm. The damage of the two guns reflects this. The 183 does 1750 damage, and the 180mm does 1700. That makes sense to me. Okay, so the T92 HMC has the biggest gun in the game. So, logically, it has the highest alpha damage per shot in the game. A mighty 2,250 alpha damage with HE. Worse yet, although the penetration is kind of poor on the high explosive rounds, because artillery has an arc, the shells land on your tank from above, which is where the weakest armor is. So it's not actually that difficult to penetrate and one-shot enemy tanks with high explosives if you hit the right spot. That is bad enough, but look, the main problem with artillery is that players found it rather unfair that someone they cannot see or shoot at or do anything to can essentially one-shot them from across the map at random. Now, the chance is low, and so you still play the game normally like everybody else, but every once in a while, bam, your entire tank is gone. And even if the artillery shell doesn't penetrate your vehicle, you're still going to be taking around 700 damage from a non-penetration. Now, obviously, a lot of players found this very unfair, because your options are to cower at the back and stay hidden, or, actually move up, play the game, contribute to your team, but risk getting your game ended just like that. Now, I'm overplaying artillery's effectiveness. In reality, like 95% of the time, the artillery shell would just miss you, due to its extremely poor accuracy. And unless the shell landed right next to you, it would do very little damage. However, it was still an issue because of just how devastating the class could be if the player simply got lucky. There was very little skill involved. Now come on, that's not a great game mechanic, obviously, right? Wargaming has tried several times to fix artillery. Now, the biggest change was nerfing their damage into the ground and compensating by giving them stun and a larger explosion radius. Now, this arguably made artillery more annoying because instead of every so often smacking someone for their entire health, which admittedly was quite rare, so you didn't have to think about it too often, but now, artillery constantly, without missing, hits you for much less damage, but it's far more frequent. And better yet, you are stunned, meaning your tank is just worse for up to 35 seconds? Like, any stun mechanic in any game has never been liked. It's always been hated. Now, unsurprisingly, this change did very little to fix artillery, and it's obvious why. It's not the damage the artillery did that made it unfair. There are plenty of tanks that do a lot of damage, that aren't anywhere nearly as hated as artillery is, right? The shit barn, the Jagdpanzer E100, and don't get me wrong, people complain about these tanks, but they are nothing compared to artillery. Why is that?
And the already the... Okay, dude. Okay, man. Bad things never come alone, as they say, right? Fuck me, dude. Fuck you, Kihan. Holy fuck.
The problem is its ability to hit you from across the map while you are unable to retaliate. It's very simple. If you can't see or counter the artillery, how are you supposed to fight back? You are completely at the whim of RNG. This is compounded by the fact that artillery, especially the modern stun artillery, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, from a technical game design standpoint, their entire class is jank, for lack of a better word. First of all, artillery doesn't have a sniper mode. It only has a top-down view. This means if you're trying to fight someone at closer ranges, you're essentially either forced to third-person aim, which is difficult, or scramble around in top-down mode. Seriously? On top of that, artillery has by far the least amount of health. Like, okay, let's look at tier 10 for an example, right? What's the average health of a tier 10 tank? Okay, I'd say around 2,000 to 3,000 for mediums, heavies, tank destroyers, roughly speaking. Of course, light tanks and some more delicate mediums have less health than that, right? But generally speaking, 2,000 to 3,000 is a good estimate. So, what does a tier 10 artillery have? 500. Oh look, 550. So you're telling me, after an entire game of getting my ass beat by these little bastards, my reward is only 500 damage? It's so strange. You mean to tell me a GW E100, an E100 hull, has less HP than a Panhard AMD little dinky light tank?
Doesn't even have tracks, dude.
And the best part, it gets even worse. What's the average damage per minute, DPM, of a tier 10 tank, would you say? It's around 2,000 to 3,000 damage per minute. Let's see what tier 10 artillery are rocking. 1,700, 1,500. And these are for the smaller caliber guns. For the larger caliber guns, it's 1,400. Now this is misleading. It actually is much, much worse. Because this is the damage if you penetrate with your high explosive rounds, which have extremely low penetration and you're very inaccurate and the shell travel time is very long. So most of the time, you're going to splash them for around 200 to 500 damage at best. So let's average that. Your average damage for the vast majority of your shots is 350, right? That's in the middle. Suddenly that 1,400 DPM, which was already quite below average, is now roughly 450 damage per minute. So you get to reload every minute to do roughly like one shot of damage. 1 minute for one shot. So with this in mind, it's so obvious why artillery love to drown themselves at the end of battles. Unless you are able to just sit around and hit someone for 350 damage every minute with impunity, they are completely and utterly useless. And as a result, helpless. Now, like, think about this yourself. Who wants to be a free kill when there's no chance of fighting back? Obviously, they're gonna drown themselves. Nobody wants to be a free kill. Well, what if they could fight back? And in a way that is fair, while also fulfilling its original intended role of digging out heavily armored tanks from fortified locations? I actually have the solution. First, let's make artillery's enormous guns actually function as an enormous gun. I would revert them back to their old high damage versions without any stun. So this class is now capable of actually doing some real damage to enemy tanks. Okay. Next, let's fix artillery's helplessness as a class and make their stats more aligned with other tanks at their tier. For the sake of this demonstration, I'll use the tier 10 American artillery, the T92 HMC. So for its wimpy health, let's buff it by multiplying it by a factor of 3. There, 1,500 HP. That's a tad bit more than what a light tank would have, but a bit less than tank destroyers. Perfect fit for tier 10. Next, I would make it twice as accurate. 0.8 accuracy is terrible if the purpose is to give long-range support. Now, it's 0.4. 0.4 accuracy is still not very good, in fact it's quite bad, but it's what you would expect for a large caliber gun, and you can still hit tanks at range, maybe not weak spots, but you can hit tanks. You may be thinking, Chems, what in the ever-loving are you doing? You are buffing artillery. Hold on, buddy, hear me out. Can you at least admit to me that with these stats, artillery is not such a helpless free kill, and instead is actually able to dish out some serious damage? Now, here's the catch. This is what will make artillery no longer be a toxic hated class. Remove top-down view and make the shells fire directly straight ahead and not like an arc. In exchange, you give it the regular sniper view. That's it. Think about it for a moment. The single worst thing about artillery is its ability to hit you from anywhere across the map without it actually being in any danger itself. Now, without the top-down view, and with its newly gained sniper view, artillery will play as a glass cannon tank destroyer. It honestly makes a lot more sense if you think about it. Tank destroyers usually have accurate, medium to high damage, high penetration guns. Now this new version of artillery will have slightly less accurate, massive damage, low penetration guns that rely on high explosive splash damage to dig out heavily armored targets. And because of this, the shell velocity should also be quite slow, even slower than it already is on artillery. But anyway, obviously, to balance it out, artillery will maintain its atrociously long aim time and horrific gun dispersion factors, along with the incredibly long shell travel time, and I mean make it longer than it already is in artillery. So that this way, artillery by no means comes even close to replacing the role of tank destroyers. Tank destroyers will still be the standard for long-range accurate support. However, in these certain circumstances where tank destroyers should prove inefficient, such as an extremely dug-in hull-down heavy, an artillery can pull up next to the tank destroyer and aid it in digging out the heavy. The best part is that with the huge damage buff, artillery on city maps can be a shotgun class like how they used to be, which can actually help the team win. Like take this for example. If someone gets shotgunned like this for 2,000 damage, now most rational people are not going to say things like, oh wow, that's so BS, I can't believe he did that, oh look at all the damage, it's so overpowered, because it's his fault for letting the artillery get in behind him that close. They would most likely say, oh man, how did I let this artillery drive up on me like that? I should pay more attention, because had I just turned around, I would have not lost as much health. Like think about it, it's not really any different from being ignorant to an FV4005 on your flank. Except, the FV4005 has 230 millimeters of penetration. The T92 HMC only has 120. Now, 120 millimeters of penetration is barely enough to go through the sides of medium tanks. Because artillery no longer has a shell arc, the chance of one-shotting a tank at random because your shell just happened to land on the engine deck is not possible. You either splash them for a little bit of damage if they're really dug in, or you catch them off guard, not paying attention. This honestly seems pretty fair to me. Here, have a look at this example. Now, you may be looking at this and thinking, geez Chems, do I really want this new version of artillery? You just smacked a hull down heavy for 900 damage? That is because I aimed that shot very carefully, and he did not do anything to avoid it. Now, normally, splashing a 703's turret would do around 300 damage, which is a reasonable amount of damage to do to someone who is impossible to dig out. Now, the reason I did 900 is because artillery now requires some skill with aiming. I know the 703's turret roof armor is 50 millimeters. My gun is 240 millimeters. I overmatch it with HE. Now, overmatching with HE means you do half the HE's damage a shot. So if the T92 HMC does 2,000 damage, I should do 1,000. And okay, I low rolled here and did 900. My careful aim allowed me to do more damage. And the thing is, the 703 could have easily avoided it. I have an extremely slow shell velocity and poor accuracy. This means the shell will take a long time to reach him. Look, he can hear me shooting at him. And even if he couldn't, you can always just use sound detection. That's right, sound detection is actually going to be useful now. All he had to do was just move a little bit. My shot would have missed or splashed somewhere else for far less damage. This is why I think it's fair. It gives the artillery player a chance at influencing the game with their high damage gun, but it also gives the enemy a chance by allowing them to move and avoid it, which is exactly what we wanted. Look, even if we miss the shot, we've convinced the heavy to move from his hull down. Even if it's just briefly, we're making it harder for him to abuse his strong position. And if you're really smart, what you can do is wait for him to aim at an ally, then shoot, because he'll be less likely to move if he's aiming at someone, right? I really don't see how this isn't a great system for both people involved. Additionally, the artillery has much more HP to play with, and given the long reload, if an artillery misses its targets, the enemy still has more than enough time to kill them from full, and they get more HP from it. The best part is that it makes sense from a class point of view. Look at the range of tank destroyer and artillery gun damage. The largest caliber tank destroyers function a lot like the smallest caliber artilleries. There's even some overlap, right? The FV4005 is the upper limit of tank destroyer calibers. Now, if you want even bigger guns, you can jump to artillery. The numbers even line up, with reloads gradually increasing as the caliber gets larger, with the exception of the Batchat 155, but that's an autoloader, right? The damage also slowly goes up. The DPMs are even comparable, but a bit lower for the larger caliber guns, as you would expect. Of course, the artillery is firing armor piercing in this chart, so that the stats can be compared more seamlessly, right? And speaking of which, I'd like to talk about AP armor piercing in artillery. I think it's okay, but the penetration needs to be nerfed. It makes the class way too strong in this arrangement. Why load HE when you've got the option to load an AP round with 370 millimeters of penetration and 1800 damage, right? So let's nerf it. Although the caliber is large, it doesn't actually make sense for a low velocity, big derpy gun to have so much penetration. I mean, we all know this, right? I mean, come on, look at the Hetzer, for example. It has a 105 mil, like tier 10 mediums, but it doesn't have 250 millimeters of penetration. It's 64 millimeters. Obviously, look at it. It's a stubby derp gun, as is artillery. When I said I want artillery to actually be able to dig out heavies from strong locations, I did not mean being able to penetrate an IS-7 turret for 1800 damage. Or like for this example, I'm shooting up at a 279's armor, penned, and did 1400. I even low rolled. Look at that. That is very unfair. To go back to our example, the T92 HMC has 370 millimeters of penetration with AP. Okay, let's nerf that down by 20%, so that it's 296 millimeters of penetration instead. This aligns more like the really high penetration guns on tank destroyers. In my opinion, this is enough penetration to go through heavy tanks that play poorly and shotgun people. However, it is still too strong in my opinion. See, despite the penetration nerf, the T92 HMC can very easily one-shot an IS-3 pretty much anywhere on the hull. And look, even if the IS-3 is playing poorly, and he doesn't realize you're there, and you're inaccurate, and you were aiming for a long time, and you shot, and you led perfectly, and he wasn't moving, and you hit him, you did everything right, and he did everything wrong, I really don't think he deserves to be one-shotted, for God's sake. Okay, leave that to the FV4005. That's its specialty after all. So yeah, on top of the penetration nerf, I propose artillery will have a similar shell penetration drop-off as tier 10 light tanks. So in case you didn't know, tier 10 light tanks have a disproportionately higher shell penetration drop-off at range. I want this to also be true for artillery. I want the penetration to be, let's say, half at 500 meters. This means that AP can only be used in certain situations, Like for example, you have the side or rear of a heavy tank, but you are unable to penetrate it with high explosive. Let's say a German heavy. And the other situation? Shotgunning. I actually like the idea of shotgunning a lot, because it allows the artillery to fight back against whoever is trying to attack it. Stupidly driving in front of an artillery should be a death sentence. Getting one shot sniped because you stopped to aim for a little bit should not be a thing. Again, let the FV4005 do that, not all artillery. However, having a linear shell drop-off is still somewhat troublesome, because with the current stats at, let's say, 200 meters, the AP shell is still going to have 237 millimeters of penetration. That still doesn't seem quite fair. 237 millimeters of penetration can still go through a decent amount of heavy tanks, especially at tier 8, frontally. No, I want AP to be loaded for shotguns or opportunity side and rear shots, not sniping. What can we do about this? Well, it's actually quite a simple fix. Make the penetration drop off exponential, not linear. Basically, the shell's penetration drops off quickly, initially, then levels off at range. With this, the penetration at point blank is still the full 296 millimeters. However, at 200 meters, it's 198 millimeters. This is quite fair. 198 millimeters of penetration will really struggle against heavies, and mediums are too fast to be hit. This sort of mimics how real bullets lose a lot of their energy, right? The faster a bullet travels, the more air resistance it encounters, and energy is its speed squared. This big, chunky, slow-moving bullet will lose a lot of its energy quickly from the moment it's fired. My point is, not only is this the best solution, it's also the most accurate to real life. Now, I really have no idea if this would be balanced or still too overpowered. Having an AP shell do 1800 damage is absolutely ridiculous. So if the penetration nerf and exponential penetration drop-off are still not enough, well, I mean, we could make the damage drop off at range as well. Just like the Polish tank destroyers. Sure, the T-92 HMC might do 1800 damage at point blank. That's huge. But at 500 meters, maybe it does only 500 damage. So with those numbers, this means at 200 meters, it does 1280 damage with 198 millimeters of penetration. This probably makes the most sense since it teaches the player to load high explosive for longer ranges where you need to splash on a dug-in heavy tank that your team is struggling to damage, and you reserve the AP for close range or very rare opportunity shots. At the end of the day, artillery is capped at 3 per team, right? So it's not like there's going to be 10 of these things blasting anybody who gets too close, right? There's still a limit on how influential artillery is going to be. I strongly encourage Wargaming to test this. Even try making an arcade cabinet for it, or something similar to the weather mode. Test this on the live server, but not in random matches. Give it its own special mode. Because the thing is, testing things on the test server is futile because the conditions on the test server are too different from true random battles. Artillery is a joke class that 90% of people don't play because it's fundamentally boring and useless. Check this out, this is a good one. Their poor light tank is just trying to get through the flank. He gets direct hit by Arty, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm shit, I'm stupid, and I'm an Arty player, and I just love to click. So let me just click here, not even fully aimed. Oh, there we go, we got him. They lost the game, by the way, because they don't have a light anymore. Or this, for example. I don't even hit this guy for 1800. It's only a measly 700, but that's not the bullshit part. The bullshit part is that he's unable to fight back against me, and I could just click for free. I'm just utterly helpless here. With these changes, artillery will become an opportunist class. For players looking to support their team, of course, but also land those sweet high damage shots to targets that deserve it, like this dude right here who's not paying attention. Now look at that, this would make for a great thumbnail. Imagine the content. I understand removing stun, will require some tweaks to the game, since there are artillery stun missions. So you either remove these stun missions, or better yet, introduce a different kind of tank that can stun. Maybe a flamethrower tank, for example. I know, relax, it's just an idea. But if you watched my Object 156.0 video, you would know that flamethrower tanks could reasonably be added to World of Tanks without ruining the game. It is possible, it just has to be done right. Speaking of premiums, you know what this class would be most similar to? The Caliban. Wait a minute, nobody complains about the Caliban. Like, it has the most ridiculous damage output, but it's like dead average on win rate compared to other tier 8 heavies. Like, nobody says the Caliban's OP. In fact, they say it's quite bad. Let's have a look at the Caliban stats and see if we can derive a hypothetical artillery from it. So with high explosive ammo, the damage is 850, but it's a 2-shot auto reloader. So if it chooses to dump both rounds, it's 1,700 damage. Oh, well, that looks kind of familiar. It's the same thing with armor piercing. 2 shots of 600 damage, so it can dump 1,200 with AP. Of course, it's got a very long reload to do so. Although, if you play smart and only fire 1 shot at a time, its reload is only for 23 seconds. Okay, here's the penetration on the ammo. 180mm with high explosive, 292mm with armor piercing. Both these values are roughly higher than what you would expect from a tier 8 artillery. So, okay, let's create our hypothetical tier 8 artillery then. Instead of clipping someone for 1700, it will just have 1700 damage in a single big high explosive shot. Likewise, the armor piercing will also do 1200. For the rest of the stats, I will steal them from the SU-14-2 prior to patch 9.18. So look, 44 seconds on the reload, 102mm of high explosive penetration, and 260mm of armor piercing penetration. However, remember what I said about nerfing artillery armor piercing pen by 20%? Well, in that case, the AP pen is now 208mm. By the way, no artillery should have armor. Like, just don't do it. This turns them into a heavy assault TD. No, do not do that. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of each tank? Okay, the Caliban has a turret, and some armor, and more penetration. The new artillery has instantaneous single-shot damage, and a better reload after firing 1700 damage. Here, look at this example. I'm playing the Caliban. I see someone giving me their rear. That is completely on them, so they deserve to eat my 1700 damage clip. Except, what if it was actually my new version of artillery? It's the exact same situation. I come around the corner, aim, fire, and boom, 1700 damage. The only difference is that it was instantaneous. However, like I said, you don't have a turret or armor or much penetration. But hey, my reload is a bit better, and when it comes to fighting heavily dug in, hull down heavies, I can always splash them for 500 damage. You know, the intended role for artillery. Hello everyone, today I'm playing the FV-207 Tier 8 British Artillery. I do 1250 alpha damage with my HE shots, so I'll probably splash for around 400 to 500 roughly-ish. Now, I could shoot this Bizante in the turret and splash him for 400, but I'm going to aim for his very weak lower plate. And as you can see, I splashed him for 750, so that was a very well-aimed shot, I think. I maximized my damage output with my high explosive rounds. So he's not too happy now. Obviously, I mean, you did just kind of push up all alone, all by yourself, and show your lower plate to an artillery, so obviously you're going to take a huge damage shot from that. And look, I've supported my team. We were able to push him much quicker and easier. So, how about this Type 63? Perhaps I can shotgun him too, right? So, you know, this thing roughly does around 500, 600 splash damage. I'm going to aim for his side, not his front. That's where the weaker armor is. There we go. Shot him, splashed him for 580. So, with my careful aim, I was able to splash him for a little more. Alright, I took a shot in return, but it's okay. I have 1,000 health instead of like 400 or whatever it is. And so I can afford to take a shot or two to get some damage out. Now, oh, would you look at this? A Type 63. And is that his roof I see? Well, I could actually pen him with this big high explosive rounds. Alright. Wow, I hit him for a 1700 damage. It said 800, but that was a splash. But technically I penned it. Shut up, okay? Just pretend with me here, pretend! I think this gameplay is far more interesting and fair than the top-down we have currently. If you think it's unfair, then I guess you think the Caliban is unfair. Okay, so this replay pretty much proves my point perfectly. Watch this game, okay? See this scout tank that's trying to, oh, I don't know, scout for his team? Oh well, tough shit, my guy. Anyway, let's try shooting some heavies. You know, these guys are pretty dug in. Okay, miss. My team could really benefit from me damaging these really tough targets. Miss, miss, miss. Okay. What about this light tank that's trying to scout? Oh, don't worry. I'll just fucking annihilate him just like that. Like, what the hell is this? Okay, I can kill light tanks. Oh, here. Oh, okay, I'm gonna miss that too. I literally just cannot help my team. Now here, I finally land a shot and I'm using damaging rounds. And look how close I am. I'm trying to pretend to be my new version of artillery so badly. Alright, now check this out, okay? The XM I've missed so many times. Of course, he's gonna run rampant. Let me kill him. Immediately spotted and killed by some vet heavy in the Ayuxin clan. Like, what the hell is this? So what am I supposed to do? Sit at the back and miss all my shots? Or be more active and just die? Oh, I know. Just kill the light tanks. Okay. Yeah, that's what artillery's for, isn't it? And like, you know what's funny? Back in the day, one of the funnest artillery to play was the FV-304. Hell, Jingles called it Bert the Avenger. Why, you ask? Because it was the least similar to all the other artilleries. It had speed and mobility. The gun had a short range, but was more flexible. The reason it was popular is because it was the least similar to all the boring top-down RNG clicking simulator tanks, right? I mean, look at this replay of Jingles playing. The only reason you're watching this is not because he's playing some intense top-down clicking simulator. It's because he's using this artillery as like an assault tank destroyer. Why is this a problem? This seems perfectly fine to me.
Shotgun. Look at that. Like I said, I mean, you know, this is not, oh, we've lost another one. But look at the hits these guys are taking. Not particularly effective. Oh, sorry, Circon. But fun. Lots and lots of fun. Another hit, and I am probably not going to survive. No, there we go. But that's alright. I played artillery. I'm not allowed to live. Those are the rules. I do like this thing though. It's fun. You know, when you get tired of sitting there just clicking on tanks from top down view, you just fire up the engine and go shotgun somebody. Do stuff in it that you're just not supposed to do in artillery, and a lot of the time get away with it. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.
So wargaming, it's quite clear that there is a desire for more dynamic and influential artilleries. It's just that nobody wants to admit it because the top-down shooting from across the map gameplay is so obnoxious. We don't want to encourage any more artillery buffs or anything. With these changes, we could actually have some tier 8 premium artilleries without it being a huge problem. Also, imagine the influx of players that would come back to World of Tanks if they found out artillery had their top-down removed and was no longer toxic. The best part is that I've designed it in such a way that it would be very easy to mass change artillery. Of course, there's many tanks in the game, and Wargaming doesn't want to have to go to each and every single one and change all of its stats and rebalance. That's a lot of work. Here, look at this chart I made right here. When I say buff the health of artillery, all you have to do is just multiply the health of all artillery at a given tier by a certain multiplier. So look at this. Tiers 2, 3, and 4, we don't need to multiply their health. It's good enough. Tier 5, multiply it by 1.5. So it goes from 300 to 450. I'm showing the American artillery as just an example. Tier 6, buff it by twice as much. Tier 7 and 8, buff it by 2.5 times as much. Tier 9 and 10, buff it by 3 times as much. So all of these healths seem pretty fair to me, right? T92 HMC has 1500 HP at tier 10. That's fine. 1350 HP at tier 9. Again, that's fine with me. Tier 8, 1000 health. This is around the health that light tanks and squishy TDs have. Tier 7, 875. So it all makes sense. It will be extremely easy to just mass change all of the stats with this system. Again, with the accuracy, we can make it twice as accurate, right? Although I'll be honest, twice as accurate might be a bit too accurate, right? Like look at the M12, 0.32, the M40, 0.37, the M53, 0.36. This might be a bit too much. So maybe instead of half, it's 80%. So maybe the average artillery is around 0.43, 0.44, and at the very best 0.36. I think that's reasonable. Again, look at this chart right here. For the armor piercing penetration, we nerf everything at tier 5 by 15%, and then we nerf everything from tier 6 and above by 20%. Now, if you noticed here, these ones are highlighted yellow because these are heat shells. We don't have to worry about those. But like here, the M12 at tier 7, 174 millimeters of penetration with AP at point blank. I think that's perfectly fair, to be honest. Same thing at tier 8, 218, only at point blank. Tier 9, 251. Tier 10, 296. I'll even show the penetration at 200 meters, right? To show you that these tanks very quickly become inefficient even at a decent distance, so you're better off firing high explosive.
Full health has just arrived. Babunil comes around the corner. The Stug puts a shot into him. Babunil manages to get out of his way so he doesn't ram him. The ARL somehow misses him. And I don't think Babunil expects to survive this situation. Now he's using the mobility of the FE304 to outflank a Stug. Ow, what? No! The ARL 44 TKs the Stug! And now Babunil is in close quarters combat with this ARL. And the ARL can't get his gun down enough. Babunil is taking advantage of this. But as a bit of a spoiler, I can tell you this ARL V44... It's not a V44, it's just a regular 44, sorry. Was ammo racked. And... sorry, how in hell's name did Babunil manage to come out of that situation? And it's time for a joust. A Hummel is another very mobile German tank destroyer. The Hummel's overturned. Babunil shotguns him just before he gets his gun back in. Oh my word. Where is he? There he is. Guerrilla's not aiming at him yet, and look at the slow traverse. Look at that slow traverse. And this, able to outmaneuver its opponents and make enemy artilleries look like junk. What an absolutely fantastic result there for Babunil.
Please go into the comments and let me know what you think about these changes, okay? I'm throwing out an idea here. I think I have a very good idea, but maybe I'm missing something. Let me know. And share this video around, not only because it gives me big dopamine number, but because if someone at Wargaming actually sees this and thinks, we're out of content, maybe this is a good idea. I think that would be great. If you enjoy these kinds of videos and you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Please hit that like button so I can have big dopamine number. Oh, wait, no. So this video can get shared around. Spread awareness. Yeah. Okay. See ya.